Hello, everyone. DeAnna Batdorf here, and I am with my lovely sidekick, Andrea Foster. And most of you, if you're new here, welcome. This is a special day because Andrea and I, we don't usually show up together on this level, but we show up for each other on the daily and have for 6 years. And so we're here to make this Q&A the best Q&A we can have, and we want to do it ongoing. So we've created a little bit of a format.
Right.
And we're going to start kind of hanging together like this. And what that's going to do is any posts of questions that come through before we start our lives, Andrea's collecting those. How wonderful for me. and we will do those first. So we'll start with the ones that really just presented, and we know that you're going to be here and you're ready for these answers. And I'll answer them. And then I'll go into, a little bit of a dialogue and a conversation for about, 10, 15 minutes. And I'll do one of my lovely little, ethos and just kind of take us somewhere. And I have a beautiful focus today. And then we'll go back to Q&A and we'll see who's live and wants to really chime in with a good question. Okay?
Right.
So here we go.
Okay.
Andrea, what do you got for me?
Well, we have had a couple of questions. The first one popped through on our Instagram feed, and it's from your dear student, Madison. So she is interested in hearing from you on if you were making a tea blend for a burnt out, really sweet doctor, what would be the main plant or plants in the blend? So she's looking for one. She said maybe like one super rock star one that I can add to other support plants. She's whipping one up to help her sleep. But she also wants to address burnout and soul support. The person she has in mind is tridoshic, she believes. But I think, some of these plants could probably relate to any first responder, teachers.
That's what I'm hearing.
Folks that are going through just the ringer right now.
That's right. Okay. I love this because this is that idea of like, what's the kind of magic plant, and we don't want to count on plants too much in that way, but what is that one plant that can be your go-to? And Madison, I call these my regulators. I have different plants that are my go-tos for different parts of the body, different reasons. In this one, the reason would be really looking to hydration, and burnout is shot nerves, and that's out of juice, and then you got to keep going because of the work you do and the way you hold service in the world. So a lot of that's going to be, me thinking about what is going to be a plant that's not going to dry them out and is going to really give them a certain kind of The other thing is the magic plant often is a plant that tastes really good. Because really, where's the magic? The magic is in the I want to drink this tea all day long.
Oh, yeah.
If I've got this bitter thing and it's like, this is good for me all day long, I might leave it on over there.
Right,
I don't know about you.
You want it to be a treat.
So it's got to be something that's going to be flavorful and taste good. And I think of things as familiar, especially since this is a doctor and they might be in a hospital or with people who are really struggling. So something that's going to have a familiarity. So the things I think of right off is cinnamon. It's got this warming, it keeps the blood moving, it keeps the lymph moving. It's really good for things like fluorescent lighting, and it's pancreatic. It's good for pancreas, thyroid, and adrenals. So you've got this whole bodied, spice that's very familiar. It's tasty. Even if you're pitta, this actually moves fire because it moves lymph and blood. So you're never going to get inflamed from cinnamon. But the other thing that's so special about cinnamon is that if you put it in some hot water overnight, like if you take a tablespoon of cinnamon powder, put it in a cup of hot water and let it just sit, it's going to turn into this very silky, mucilagenic little sludge. Which, by the way, my partner Scott, a lot of people know he used to be a baker, and he's very good gluten-free at this point. That's great. But he takes the cinnamon sludge and he slips it in the middle of the muffins when he makes muffins, and it has this beautiful cinnamon center. So what do you do with that sludge? It's the start of this tea. Okay. And you don't have to do the hot water. It's just going to really show you how nourishing cinnamon is. And it's going to kind of make it move slower. Like think about, chia and how it kind of slimes everything. Cinnamon slimes that cell, makes it where you just have a little more time to absorb the water you are drinking or the water that's in that tea. So I think cinnamon is going to be one of my go-tos. Plus, you can really build around cinnamon. You could throw some ginger in there, whole nother world. You could throw cardamom in there. You could do both of those. You could also go into a whole nother category, which is really, what if you're someone who absorbs too many things energetically, talking of the soul piece. Now, cinnamon's known for the soul too, warming of soul, heart medicine, but mint. And mint's easy. Like even if you don't grow it, you can buy it in the store, and it again has that familiar flavor. So you could think about like a cinnamon mint, which by the way, we know this. Where do we know this from? Where do we know cinnamon and mint from? You've seen cinnamon.
Oh, that's true.
That's the little hint.
That's like every cool gum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also dental care, toothpaste.
Oh, true.
So you can get it in your gum, you can get it in your dental, you can get it in your toothpaste. These are things we use that are about metabolism and gut relation, and they're somewhat cleansing. So I think a cinnamon and mint, or I think a cinnamon and cardamom, or cinnamon ginger, depending on how warming or cooling, because think about that. Cinnamon is pretty down the middle. It looks dry, and it has astringency bitter, which is dry, but it makes that really thick, sweet finish and that mucilagenic, so it's actually nourishing. And then here, it's obvious to the tongue, it's warming, but it's not going to overheat you. So how cool is that? You could really build around that cinnamon and bring it into more cooling, and that could be lemon balm or mint. It could also be lemon verbena. These are things people have in their yards sometimes. The only other one I would mention here, and maybe you could think of it as now a combo, is chamomile. It's another familiar. You can get it in a tea bag. Some people are happy to just throw a tea bag in that cinnamon, add more warm water, and that's that. Chamomile does not make you go to sleep. They use it in sleepy time because it calms down the nerves. But it's not a sedative. It's a nervine. And that makes it a nerve regulator. So yes, adrenals, and yes, kind of what are you going to do to keep everything flowing in this really hectic world? But I think of chamomile as that like main nerve strengthener. That's just kind of like, I can do this. I've chosen this moment to moment. And the big part for this person would be, how do they transition when they get home? I think transition is everything. What do I do from work to home? And by the way, now that I'm like working home, isn't that like the same thing now?
Exactly. There is no transition anymore.
So you have to figure out how to transition yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get to your self-care when we're in the middle of our house all day long. And then I'm doing less. I'm like, what's going on? I can speak to myself. I have figured that out. I'm like, this is actually more challenging when I'm home this long, because man, can I get busy with other stuff.
Right.
So yeah, that would be my tea idea. Maybe adding milk to it, and that could be from dairy if it works, to coconut milk, to hemp milk, to oat milk. You're going to make anything more nourishing in a tea. That's really common in Ayurveda. Who gets a milky tea? Vata.
Right.
And that's a Vata kind of situation. It's a Vata environment.
Right.
Yeah.
And would this work for kapha too?
I would say if I was doing kapha, cinnamon is one of the number one things for for kapha, and even going deeper into, since kapha has more metabolic and weight issues, cinnamon is the #1 research plant for type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And there's a lot of diabetes in the hospital. This doctor sees diabetes all the time. It's our #1, across the world. Globally, diabetes is a massive issue. And then I think of cardamom, cinnamon, mint.
Perfect.
I don't make that combo very much, but I use all of those. I'm actually going to try that one. Cinnamon, cardamom, and mint. It's going to be really nice.
Yeah. Good time of year for it.
Sure is. Yeah.
All right. So,
Thanks, Madison.
yeah. We have another question from Anne Marie. She wants to hear about how to kind of take your beautiful apothecary barb into her home and make some fun drinks. And she also has a question about Pinda.
Okay.
And the medicine used in Pinda. So we've got
okay.
2 different things going.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
This is fun. I'll take a moment and even talk about the Pinda just so everybody's in the same zone, and it won't take long, but let's first go into mocktails. Okay, so mocktails are really pretty, they're life-changing for somebody who has other habits. And it can be any habit that is an oral fixation-related habit. So having something to drink, sometimes people aren't just, drinking too much alcohol. There's something that they're trying to satiate to go inside their mouth. So these mocktails are good for people who have a lot of smoking issues, or they bite their nails, they have nervous habits, or they bite their gums, or they literally are having issues with, like, if I don't drink something good, I'm gonna drink something else. Right. And this is really common, which is why I'm talking about it. We are not talking about it enough. We are all doing this in our little homes. We do all kinds of things, and then we go out and we're like, yes, and I'm doing all this great stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, we got to get more real here. So this is a true struggle people bring to me all the time. So the mocktail, really, one of the things Scott and I did, because we did a lot of play to make the mocktails at the apothecary bar. And one of the things we found was, you can use a lot of medicine like aloe and bitters, but they're concentrated. And so then our drinks were really tiny, and we kept saying, how do we make this more volume, but we don't want to use like mineral water, which is bubbles, so it's more air, it's drier. And so we hit on the idea of decoctions and basically making a tea, which is kind of a play on Madison's question too. So we start with the tea base, which is just really one of the secrets, honestly. And we make a nice big batch of tea, and then we ratio in maybe lime. Like, for instance, Kumari it's not a very complicated, We start with a beautiful coriander tea, and then from there, that one is with the spearmint tea. And we start with the spearmint tea, and then we add a ratio of aloe vera juice. We make sure it's inner fillet aloe vera so that there's no laxative effect, right? And then we just crush in fresh mint. We muddle mint in with a little bit of ice or even without. And then we splash in some lime juice. So it's mint, lime, aloe, and spearmint tea.
So good.
It's really, really simple, So think about that idea that you're making like a really yummy tea, like our Damiana Dream starts with Damiana tea. The margarita starts with the coriander tea. Like, just really think about, like, make a tea base and then make your tea fun. Because some people will be like, I'm so into my tea. Some people will tell me, like, I get bored with the tea, and I'm like, yeah, you just got to put it in a margarita glass.
Right? Yeah.
Put a rim around it.
And it's perfect for when the temperature spikes.
Yeah.
And you're wanting something refreshing. You want kind of the tea feel, but you don't want this hot cup of something.
That's right.
Having that cool, that Kumari is so refreshing.
Yeah.
Oh.
My favorite, I think, is the margarita. And that's got fresh cucumber juice. We juice cucumbers in there. So that's like the salty with that little, it gives you that little, and then we put that sumac and salt rim around it. So you get that sour, salty, which is
That's
what we
that
know.
pitta in you that loves that.
But yeah, that margarita just totally, I feel like I hit the mark, But yeah, so start with the tea base and then really think about your ratios. And each one of our drinks also has a bitters. We make all our own bitters, and they have the bitters in there too. So you're getting a little kind of, really you're getting a tincture, a little bit of tincture, a dropper full of tincture in each one of those. And that's another concentrated medicine. So you're thinking about, okay, what tincture am I adding with what tea? And then what am I kind of muddling? What's the fresh herb, or what's the citrus? What's the fruit or the herb that you're going to muddle for freshness? And then the tea, and then the little bit of tincture. That's really what a bitter is. A bitter is a tincture.
Exactly.
They're not any different.
Right.
Right.
Like
So
you could make yourself an herbal old fashioned with all kinds.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the secret. I just shared my secrets. Oh my gosh. No. But yeah, it shouldn't be a secret. These are things we should be able to, consider doing as part of our repertoire in our kitchens, and playing with life. Healthy play. That was what the bar was all about. We wanted to create a place where you could still have dynamic conversations.
Yes.
And, and sit around and still feel like you're, taking in your medicine as a luxury. Because let's be honest, knowing about medicine and having all of this at our disposal, it is enough of a luxury. I don't know that we should be taking any more luxuries. We need to take action, get to work, get out in the world, help people. Just saying.
Excellent. And then the pinda.
Oh yeah. Ooh, fun. I forgot all about it. This is why Andrea's here. So the pinda are these boluses that you make wrapped in sheet or fabric, and we pound them out. We blow all the air out of the joint, so you kind of surround the joint, or you tenderize the muscle. Some people do it very intensely and kind of really open things up, but it's really about this beautiful rhythmic kind of pulsation that you're using with these soft, beautiful boluses. So that's the first thing. It's a bolus, and it's called pindamaksa. Maksa means to bring up heat, right? And so this is something where you're building blood, moving lymph, opening and tenderizing muscle, the first three tissues of the body. The way we make them is we put herbs. We have a sheet that's about 18-inch square, and you put some herbs, and I'll talk about which ones. And then you put your cooked rice. You don't want it too wet. Okay, some people like them a little bit wetter. I've learned, and I like mine a little bit drier, so I cook my rice with a little less water. And that way, you just fold them up. You want to tie them in knots. You just keep taking 2 ends, make a knot, 2 ends, make a knot, but get it as tight as you can, because as you're using it, it's gonna already mush. It's rice, So make them nice and tight. And then you can just pound out your lungs. And whoever's asking this question, lovely.
It's Anne Marie.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say this is a very timely question, because this is a really good remedy for how do you get stuff out of your lungs.
Oh, there it is.
Because it's deep, and then we know it's deep, and then we're like, but now it's all in there, and how do I get it out? It's one of those organs people don't know how to clean,
right?
Other than exhale better. So pinda, oh my God, it just opens everything up. Even just try this and see how it feels. If you can feel it, do a little Tarzan. You can feel it, and it just gets in there. So you do have your own pindas, but they work brilliant for opening things up. Now, what do I use inside of them? I'll put just about a half a teaspoon. Okay, so I just made some pindas yesterday, so I know exactly what I put in my pinda. Interesting enough, but I did a half a teaspoon of ginger powder, and I just sprinkle it right in the middle, not on the whole sheet, just right in the middle where the rice is gonna go. Little half a teaspoon. And then I did a half a teaspoon of nutmeg powder. And then I did a teaspoon of calamus root powder. Okay. You could do, and I use cinnamon in those sometimes, but you could just do nutmeg and ginger, if you don't have calamus. But calamus is something that grows in California too, so it is a native here. And these herbs are about penetrating. They're about using pitta penetrating. It's about driving nutrients deep beyond your skin layers and infiltrating the muscles and getting the bones to relax and all the muscles and all the tendons and the ligaments. And so that's really the job of Pinda. Yes, you're moving lymph and blood because it's exercise. Everything exercise related moves lymph and blood. Mm-hmm. But it's really about muscle meeting bone. And so it's really great for not a pain, you don't use Pinda on pain. But say you have an injury and you're kind of wanting, you're not in the middle of a flare. It's really good to go in there and break up the scar tissue, break up the adhesions, all the things that has been your body trying to protect that area. Mm. We end up with all these adhesions that adhere and try to, keep it in place. And that calamus and that nutmeg, especially, it just liquefies it. Mm. So you're looking for sour, pungent when you're using herbs in a Pinda. So play all you want. You're just looking at what's sour and what is pungent. And that's really where you're going to get liquefaction in that Pinda. And that's Pinda's job. Tenderize. If you're going to tenderize, you got to get some liquid.
Yes. All right. Now, I do know that we've got a lovely number of folks here. So let us turn our attention to who we've got with us. I see Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Martha.
Oh,
wow. Greta's in Sacramento.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And Nicole is saying hi, and Kiki's saying hi.
Oh my gosh. Love you all. Man, yeah. I hope you can see how connected we are, even if we aren't seeing each other. I hope everyone still feels the connection. I still feel so connected. It's really, really wild to feel so deeply entrenched and in love with so many people and have shared so much time with so many people. I just keep holding that in my cells every day. I'm just like, you know what? Nothing changed when it comes to have made a connection. Connections are just still there, no matter what. You just have to kind of pull them in a little bit more. And yeah, thank you all.
All right, and Claudia has a question.
Okay.
She is wondering what she can do for bleeding gums.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll be honest, bleeding gums is big in my family. And as I've gotten older, that has been my telltale sign whenever I know I need to get on it more and I need to look at specific things. So I actually know this one. So I don't live with bleeding gums. I more will notice it happens. And then I'll say, okay, hold on. I better do a couple weeks of some deep dental care and get on it. So one of the first things I just want to put forward is to make your own mouthwash. Now, you can get my tooth powder, because what I do is I take a bottle of my tooth powder and I put it in a 16-ounce container of witch hazel. And that is my mouthwash.
Yeah.
I let it sit for about a month. I just keep shaking it and everything else, and then I'll strain it out so that it lasts for a really long time. If I don't strain it, if I just use it up, it works fine too, not to strain it. But witch hazel is so good of a medicine, and it just tonifies those gums, and it just really shuts down those little cuperose blood vessels, which is actually what's bleeding. So you're not, the nerve endings aren't bleeding. Your gums, yes, they are bleeding, but what is bleeding in the gums? It's those tiny little blood vessels, and they're pretty gentle because it's a moist environment. And it's also a very high bacteria environment, So first, that would be the first thing. The other thing I like doing is just we're back to mint, but you know, if you just have some fresh mint and you just take it, I don't know why more people, I'll tell someone like take the leaf, put it in your mouth and just rub it all over the place, in and out. And someone's like, why did I never think about that? I'm like,
Sounds fun.
why do we even want to chew on things? Like, it's dental care, you know? And activating those enzymes. And mint has brilliant amount of enzymes to offer the bacterial base of your mouth. And the more bleeding, the higher bacteria. So that's just a bottom line. Usually that tells me like, is there some yeast in there? Like, what have I eaten? You know, boy, you know, that loaf of bread that Frankie dropped off at my house, that sure was good. And it really was, and it was made with love, so we ate it.
It's the best.
So, you know what I'm saying? You know, just that idea of like sometimes my yeast will go up. I'll get just a little too much sugar here and there, and then somewhere, and then all of a sudden I'll notice this bleeding. So you might want to think about tracking sugars related to bacteria, because the bleeding gums is related to that. You know, so I do have to be honest with myself whenever it shows up, and get a little bit more clear about like, okay, what am I doing in my diet? I start bringing in a whole lot of cilantro, and I just noticed that it'll also, if I just make like a, you know, one of my cilantro pestos with pumpkin seeds, you know, and just start eating that on everything, it'll change just within like 3 or 4 days. So I use it as a beautiful symptom to kind of gauge where I am. But it could take a little bit of work as far as stomach health to really, really see that go away if it's something you have every day. So I do think that's going to relate to either a cavity that's unaddressed. That's another reason people use the tooth powder, is they actually pack it. I have them put it in a little bit of beeswax and then just pack it into a cavity. And it's really, really effective. I've even seen some cavities go away. I've kept my cavities away all these years, you know, so it has done well for me. But these are things that are just connected to bleeding gums. It's not a standalone symptom. So it's either like something's happening in the stomach and it's affecting the upper, or there's something that's living in the mouth that isn't working and it's starting to, you know, slow drip. And that's what I try to tell people. I'm like, remember, whatever's going in your mouth is slow dripping down into your gut. And then that's really the picture to look at, gut health. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And looks like we have a question from Debbie about chronic BV.
Okay. So bacterial vaginosis, BV. So this is a great question. And I'm actually getting ready to do a whole little webinar series. I'm feeling it again. And I'm going to do pelvic floor. And I was going to do yoni health. And I was also going to do lingam health. Because I like to be, you know, looking at both of those. So yeah, let's talk about that. There's a couple really great things you can do. One would be yoni steams. And if you're going to do yoni steams for this, you don't want to think they're going to do everything for you. You only are getting a little bit of herbal steam, you know, and it depends on kind of how much you're crouching out and how much room you make at the vaginal wall for you to really be able to get that nutrients, but it's pre-warming the space. And it's definitely killing anything that it has, you know, contact with at the foundation. So that's there, but mugwort. And you know, if you go to like the Korean, can't you wait to get back to a bathhouse? Oh my gosh. So anyway, at the Korean bathhouses, they have these troughs of mugwort tea.
Whoa.
Running mugwort tea troughs. Yeah, at Imperial, is it Imperial? No, Olympia Spa in Tacoma, Washington. There's one right on this side of Seattle and another one on the other side of Seattle. And there's these beautiful mugwort tea troughs, and you just start working your system. You're just cleaning yourself, and you're just cleaning yourself, you know, and you'll see, you know, women kind of like flushing it in their eyes and everything. And so they use the mugwort tea for like any kind of bacterial that is living on us, you know? And sometimes somebody will have BV, which is bacteria, and I'll notice on their pulse or by questions, I'll really recognize that it's not really just a standard bacteria, it's yeast. And it's yeast, which is a fungus, and it's living in this beautiful moist area, which fungus loves more than anything. And so it's just like, oh, I'm gonna make myself at home in here. I'm just gonna hang out in this moist, beautiful environment.
Yeah.
And so I like to treat bacterias and funguses instead of trying to like which one. Well, mugwort covers both. And the thing that, yes, so not only can you do the yoni steam, but you could take that water, if you're listening, you could, maybe, go into your bathtub and put that steam there, so you can really crouch low on it, if you are able to do that. And then you can also take it and clean it. You can get it in there. We are allowed to put our fingers in there and help ourselves out. We are allowed to clean that space out. So you get up in there with that mugwort tea and you just really clear out your pan. It's just like a little vessel in there. So it's not that hard to clean that vessel, And so I want to just invite people to do that. And the other thing you can do with that mugwort tea is you could do a douche. And I have the most amazing forever enema and douche buckets. They're stainless steel. If you haven't seen my new buckets, I love them.
Yes.
But it comes with a applicator that's specific for douching, which kind of has a fountain spout throughout the whole, wand. And you can use that as like a little mini gua sha. Like you can kind of, work it around the edges, and you're just kind of cleaning yourself out. It takes about 5 minutes to do a douche. And as long as you're not drinking mugwort tea all day, I'm not talking about drinking mugwort tea. You would want to be careful with that. I'm talking about using it topically and vaginally. If I was going to give you essential oil, because that's just one way to go about this as far as like cleaning what is moving. The true answer to this, to be honest, is essential oils. I'm sorry, but essential oils rock when it comes to like amoebas and parasites and bacterias and microbes. I mean, there's just nothing like them that really, bypass the digestive tract and go straight to your bloodstream if you have a bacteria that is really affecting you long term. So I think of spikenard essential oil. I think of Palo Santo. I think of good old patchouli. Just make sure it's not a perfume patchouli. Like get a true patchouli because it smells so much better anyway. But these are all myrrh. So a lot of the resins, right? All 4 of those I just mentioned are resins. Vetiver's not going to do it. But yeah, I'd say if you did 6 drops of any one of those twice a day, and if you really want to just kind of think really cheap and simple, maybe you have some cedar wood sitting around. You would want Atlas cedar wood or Himalayan cedar wood. 6 drops twice a day, and you would just put it on the inner thigh. And you could do a little swab vaginally. All of these are safe in that way. Resins aren't going to work in the douche or in the steam because they are not water soluble. So you want to get those on your skin and do some massage and open the lymph in that whole region. We do have lymph nodes on the side of each of our labias, so you really do want to see if those feel sore or if they're compacted. It'll feel weird and lumpy down in there when you start feeling around, and then you're like, do I feel weird and lumpy? What's going on? Or all of a sudden it's all crunchy and you're like, whoa, it's all dry and kind of rubber band in there. Is that my muscles? Muscles don't feel like tight rubber bands. Those are tight muscles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so then you can really think about what you can do to get some flow in that space. So when you're doing the yoni steam or even before the douche, you're going to get way more cleansing if you pre-open the lymph in that region, And if you're not sure about the lymph system, I've got plenty of webinars you can, I think I talk about it in everything I do, so it won't take you long to learn more from me.
So connected. All right, and we've got some love from Sasha and Megan and Davida and Tara. Kristen, yes, we are seeing comments today. Yay! All right.
Beautiful.
Let's see.
Well,
Oh, Kiki's wondering if bergamot would be.
yeah, I think
Something.
I think bergamot would be a really good one here. You know, where you've heard me speak of bergamot a lot, with this one would be with yeast and fungal. If it really was a true bacteria, I don't really see bergamot doing very much for bacteria bases like that. I think of it more for fungal. So think about the cedarwood with the bergamot if you weren't sure, you know, or put the Palo Santo with the bergamot. So I think bergamot's a perfect kind of really making sure you covered all your bases. But it wouldn't probably be my first go-to for a true BV assessment. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Kiki.
Yeah. Well, while we are waiting for some other questions to come through, were you interested in talking a little bit about tongue?
Yeah. So I had I'm glad so many lovelies are here because I woke up this morning and I was like, what do I want to talk about today? I don't have an agenda yet. But you know me, I like to be on the fly anyway. I get inspired. So this was my on the fly this morning. I was just like, what am I doing? I don't know. And I just kind of sat with it and I was like, I want to review for some of you. Some of you, this will just be like, what? Microbes on the tongue. And you really do have to hear it a few times, and maybe I'll be more focused because you're not just learning all the ins and outs of how to read the tongue. I do teach that at other times. But you don't have to know everything about how to read the tongue to be able to stick your tongue out and look at it in the mirror and know a few things about how to read it. So I was just giving a little, you know, kind of, ooh, this is cute, a little taster.
Oh, I see what you did there.
A little taster for our tongue and how to read it. And I thought, you know, last Q&A, I took a moment to talk about we're in fall and it's all about clearing the intestines and just about digestive health so that your immunity is really secure in winter. So I'm just going to make sure, if you weren't here, that was really something I want to make sure is a part of this. And this is kind of part 2, to be honest, is, you know, like clear your intestines is all about your healthy immunity, and not having a bunch of your energy like working on something that just needs to get out of your body, you know. But often this is the time of year when things show up on the tongue and people have a lot more rearing the head of like a worm or an amoeba or a parasite or yeast. And I'm seeing this as I am working with people. So I'm absolutely seeing, I'm like, it's so interesting how we go into cleanse, we're not quite going into it, and then anything that's in there is kind of like, feed me Seymour, you know what I mean? And you're not even in winter yet when that's kind of more of a emotional thing in winter, you know? So I'm just gonna take a moment and really talk about a few things we can read on the tongue. And the first thing is our tongue is a map of our nervous system, just like our face and our hands and our feet, nerve endings. And when you stick your tongue out, let's just say this is the tongue, right back here, look at me, right back here. Now you have taste mounds back here. Those are taste mounds. Don't worry about those. You're fine. But right in this divot to the back is the small and large intestine. And it usually, if it's kind of concave, when you stick your tongue out, we know that it's a depleted. So first off, you will know there's more dry out and more nourishment needed if it kind of makes a little bowl shape. Sometimes it's super extended and mounded up, right? And then we know that something is very thick and kapha and muddy, and it's clogging up your channels. And you may not even know you're constipated. We can call that constipated, but you know, your stool can move around, you know, like the intestines stretch. So we think like, well, how could it get around something that's stuck? It does. So you could still be having bowel movements, but you might be like, what's this like, you know, wet stuff? What's this soft stuff? What's this like, you know, and you're just not feeling good about your gut. And that usually tells us there's something kind of sticky, and so it'll be mounded up. So those are the first two things I think is really interesting to look at to see if you have a true, what they call ama excess, and it's an obstruction, or are you in depleted and it's really needing to nourish? You know, you got to soak that pan first. So that's the first thing I want to bring forward. But the really interesting thing about reading the tongue is when I was taught that I could read like a parasite is different than a worm, is different than an amoeba, I thought, come on, I can read that on the tongue. Like I remember having that thought, and I totally trust my teacher. But it is proven to absolutely show itself. And not only that, is you can watch it move on the tongue as it is leaving your body. So that started getting like, whoa, I can teach my, you know, a client will say like, when do I know I'm done? And I'll be like, you can't see it anymore. And it'll also start migrating. You'll see it move out.
Wow.
Sometimes it'll get stuck in another spot down the line. And then all of a sudden I'm like, see, now it's stuck over there, you know? And then I'll palpate their gut right in that area, and they'll be like, what?
Wow.
So our intestines move the same as our intestines, ascending, transverse, descending. So ascending, transverse to the back, descending to the outside. That is your colon on the tongue. And you can start watching it through. The very middle of your tongue back there is small intestine. Little harder to know where in the whole huge long plumbing. Harder to know. But that will tell me whether it's in the small or large intestine by placement. I know. Now let's talk about a few things. And I'm going to back this up with like, I'm not like really parasite or amoeba crazy. It's just a lot of people do have them. And I started finding them on the tongue, and they're like, I think I'm spirit invaded, or something's taking over my body, but like I don't understand what's going on. And then I'll say, you know, you got this thing on your tongue, please go get a lab. And then sure enough, the lab is like, oh my gosh, I have worms. So, you know, I've even done that where I found this on the tongue and then was able to go and get it confirmed. Love labs, you know, and then I know I can truly get into the depths of treating it. I'll tell you what though, no matter how involved you want to get in a treatment, you still got to do your enemas. You still got to do purgation. You got to get all that debris out of there no matter what. So let's remember that's the bottom line, is just clearing the intestines this time of year. Keeps all these things moving out of you. But what's the difference between a worm, an amoeba, and a parasite on the tongue? Oh, this is a joke. No showing. Oh gosh, that's good. So let's talk about it though, because it's really interesting. Parasites first. Parasites are they multiply. They're really prolific. So they show up and they're small little microbes, microscopic. So important to know that they show up as multiple little red bumps. Not raised, like you might have some inflammation and your taste buds get a little redder or they get raised, you know, so don't check your tongue right after you eat, you know, a hot meal. But they make little craters. So it's not when they're raised, actually. They're like really bright red, and they look like somebody just made a perfect little circle with a razor and just kind of sliced a little layer off. So it's a crater. And it's glossy and red, and they're little. They're sometimes even... They're about the same size as a taste bud, which is what makes them a little bit confusing. So you're looking for like, wait, that's recessed in. It's super glossy, and there's going to be like whole little dot after dot after dot in an area. Okay? So then we know that there probably is a parasite. And then again, what area does it show up tells me where that is really finding a home. Because these things like to like make themselves at home and then multiply, you know. So where is it? Small intestine or large? But that's that. And then parasites, just as you know, symptomology wise, usually you're losing weight, major monkey mind, like you cannot turn your analytical anxiety brain off. So sometimes someone will be like, nothing happened. I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm so stressed, you know, and I'll know, like, wait a minute. Okay, they've got little chumpers. And parasites are so depleting, really dry and hot. So they cause a lot of inflammation that you just can't quite figure out when you have this alkaline diet, that type of thing. Okay, so that's our first picture here with the parasitic. Next one is going to be amoebic. And when you have an amoeba, amoebas are very wet. They're more kapha. And they have the same crater, so they're recessed out, but they're irregular. They're large. It's a larger patch. It's an irregular patch. And it usually has this little white lining of mucus around the edge of the crater. So it's not just an area where like you had a coating and part of it, you know, peeled off and now you have an irregular patch. It's going to be recessed in and it's going to have a pale mucus ring around the edge. And it's usually somebody who has a lot of mucus that they're constantly, you know, feeling like they have to swallow, or they notice they have a lot of coating on their tongue. Because amoebas, they're like snail trail. They like slime everything. You know, whereas parasites are little munchers. They're like bam, 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 little Pac-Mans. And amoebas are like, they're more like Spirited Away. Hope y'all are watching your movies. But you know, that like, you know, and just kind of like taking up and making things mucky. And they actually make you gain more weight. And they do make you more mucousy, and they make foggy brain. Parasites are more common in food and arid terrains, and amoebas are more common in water and also tropic terrains. All of them can live anywhere, but it's just a good, you know, kind of looking at all these little details. Okay, and usually you're gonna have one big round circle. It's not going to be multiple little tiny red dots like the parasites. So they look quite different from one another. The next one is worms. And worms is a really tricky one because they cocoon and they hide in your body for sometimes years and years and years at a time. And you just keep getting more and more depleted and just kind of losing your energy. And you feel like, I mean, a lot of times someone will come to me with a worm. I don't know they have a worm. I'm not even thinking worms. It's not my first thought at all. But they just kind of are like, something is sucking me dry and nobody can figure it out. And the labs don't tell me anything definitive. And maybe I have spirit invasion. And they just feel like something has got a hold of them and is sucking them dry. And, you know, that is an interesting, you know, kind of thing. And they'll be like, no one has figured it out. I don't know what to do. And I'll say, have you been tested for worms? You know, I have ways to read the pulse where I feel very versed, but that tongue, it absolutely shows up. And I'm going to talk about two different kinds of worms. One is the tapeworm and the other one is pinworm. Tapeworm, one long worm. You could have more than one. Let's hope you don't. But they're long and they're really fiery and they make people very angry and they really, really, really suck you dry. So they're very hot and dry. And they cocoon themselves and they kind of make a little patch, a little, you know, cocoon pocket in your intestines. And they kind of eat your nutrients. I mean, it's just the truth. I know we're kind of talking about intense stuff, but these things are real. And sometimes they're the answer for somebody who's just tried everything. And then there's pinworms, and the pinworm is much more, you know, it's prolific. and you're going to get multiple ones, you know, and there's going to be a lot of dumping of pinworms when you really go to how your bowel movements. And so, you know, they multiply. They don't necessarily cocoon, they take up a lot of space throughout the intestines over time. So, what do they look like on the tongue? On the tongue, when you go back to this, you know, area, they love to live in the little hammock of your body called your transverse colon, because they can just kind of get right up through here, right next to the stomach too, really, you know. And they just kind of hang out in this little hammock and just kind of bring down the two sides of your colon. That's the most common place we find them, and I find them a lot in that back middle part of your transverse on your tongue. And they literally look like a pretty deep crater, deeper craters than the other two, and red, but they look like a little squiggle line, like almost like a little snake. You know what I mean? Is how those tapeworms show up, you know, because they're kind of like a little snake. And the thing with those tapeworms is you really do want to, you know, this is going to be essential oils. I mean, I'm going to give a picture for that. Palo Santo is my go-to wormwood. You better know how to use it. Don't use more than 2 drops a day, but it is going to be your friend. And that's why I carry it. But Palo Santo, you can use up to 12 drops a day. Very, very safe. And this is for any of these. I have found, like, what can I just tell somebody to get started while they're waiting for labs? And I'm not necessarily trying to, you know, do everything for them. I want to know, so I'm not hurting them or stripping them out. So that's safe. But it looks like a little squiggly, and it's like pretty deep crater. Sometimes it even just looks like a crack that's cracked open, and it's irregular. Whereas the pinworms are a little tricky because they are round like the parasite, but they're round like the parasite, but they make like little mucus pockets. Like they're not red at all. The pinworms, and they do make people really cold, and they lower the blood pressure as they're using up your energy. But they're like little white, you know, little white marks, you know, looks like a little mucus bump, you know, type of thing. I hope I'm explaining that in words good enough. But they're quite different, and you're going to see them in multiples, like I explained the parasite. So I bring this up today. It might seem like, whoa, you're going into some serious terrain, and I am, but this is the time of year that these really show up. They will absolutely take your immune system down and won't help you in winter. And whether you have these or not, it's really about, like, again, clearing out your intestines. They can't keep living in there if you keep cleaning house. You're going to find them. You know, and so that is really what I'm going to say is 12 drops of Palo Santo every day. And then once you get your labs and you start saying, whoa, this is real, I've got something, then I would really look into that 2 drops of wormwood a day. I would probably wait for that until you have some confirmation. You can't just trust your tongue's going to tell you everything. It's going to tell you whether you need to go get a lab or not. So we're not trying to just make these up and then treat them here, okay? We're trying to say, wow, our tongue can tell us if there is something living in our body that we need to remove. And it is our right to be able to say, wait a minute, people have been looking at this tongue, you know, I mean, it was only until the 40s that doctors stopped looking at your tongue every time you went into the doctor's office. They read the tongue. You know, they read your pulse, they read your face, they read your skin, they read your tongue. Not that long ago. So this is not just about Ayurveda or global medicine, which just already figured out assessment around the world. They just had all this dialed in, you know, 2,000, 6,000 years ago. But it's also the idea that, like, these are just things that, you know, kind of became like, well, we don't need the extra sign. We got the labs now. And so then the lab just says yes or no. And sometimes these things can also hide in a lab. So unfortunately, that's the truth too. So I like my labs. I like confirmation of labs, But there have been times where, you know, a tapeworm didn't show up in the lab, and then I just was like, I kind of think, and they're like, I'm gonna do it, and I'm like, let's be safe, and then sure enough, they passed a tapeworm, and they did, and you know,
Now, when you talk about those essential oils, are you saying to use them topically?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, use them topically. You can rub either one of those straight on your abdomen. You know, they both would be safe to do that way. I probably wouldn't use that wormwood for more than 6 weeks, and again, only 2 drops a day, not 2 drops twice a day.
Right.
2 drops a day, and I would use it at night so you get the most done during your sleeping hours. Because when we're sleeping, it's easier to you know, kill microbes. Yeah. Yeah, but they can be topical, easy. Put them in your hand, rub them on the skin. They go right into your bloodstream.
Yeah, that's true. They're powerful. All right, looks like a couple more questions came through. You feeling up to it?
Yeah.
Okay. I know this is running a little over time, so if you have to go, it's okay. This will be recorded. All right. We have a couple questions connected to the tongue. Let's see. What about if you know your tongue is puffy?
Like the whole tongue is puffy or an area of the tongue is puffy is probably a question. If you know you have a thicker tongue, so first off, we have thin, small tongues, vata, just like air is thinner, and that's why they are more petite in nature. You have very sharp, kind of muscular tongues, pitta, and you have thicker tongues that are kapha. So the question would be, you know, is it, you know, thicker than your thumb, for instance? You know, then that would be too thick. If it's thick only around the edges, well, that's your liver, spleen, blood. So that means there's probably stagnation in your liver, spleen. So if it's all thick, it might just be, you know, the beautiful kapha part of you. And if it's only thick in a certain area, then you know there's probably something that's at least congested. And the more coating that's in the region, the more you would know that there is an obstruction, not just congestion. Yeah, so, yeah, and the more pale that tongue is, the more you know it's connected to blood flow. So you want like a good, nice pink tongue, you know? Yeah, so you know.
Karen's wondering if you're seeing clients individually.
I'm seeing clients remotely. So I'm doing my Zoom consults, and they're going really great. I gotta be honest, my intuition is like, I'm actually doing really good in the ethers. I gotta be honest. For as much as I avoided it all these years, it's quite interesting how my intuition and my ability to track symptoms is just really working. I'm starting to believe that, you know, it's a beautiful science and map that I can kind of use anywhere. So I really invite you to see me there. And there's a whole bunch of like what I can do in my consults under remote consults. I think it's under offerings on the website.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, I'd be happy to do some time and give you my support. And I hand out, I do all my handouts and I take notes while I talk. I'm actually really good at tracking myself.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. We've got Jennifer who is wondering about herbs to take if she hasn't had her menstrual cycle in quite some time, and she's also thinking of good crowning herbs and self-care. So.
Okay. So it sounds like perimenopause and kind of in preparation. So my go-to is always 4,000 milligrams evening primrose, you know, and I'm on that, you know, myself. I haven't stopped my menses yet, but it's been more irregular, which is uncommon for me. So I know I'm there at 51. But evening primrose, really brilliant for just that regulating and kind of tapering off your hormones. Because you remember, if we're releasing those hormones to not make them anymore, there's not a, I don't feel like there's a big need for me to replace something that my body is innately diminishing. So it's more about how do you know, they call menopause pause to change. And they say it's running on wisdom. So how do you kind of gear how much energy you actually have? How do you follow through more before you move on? Where's your savings account of energy? And you just really want to get an essential fatty acid that is going to boost your nerves and your bones, and regulate those hormones. And that is evening primrose, 4,000 milligrams a day. And it's really well known for hot flashes. I will tell you, the more dehydrated you are, the more hot flashes you're going to get, because fire rises without buffer. So people who have a little more juice at the time they go through it, don't always have as many hot flashes, or they'll just get like one big one while they're sleeping, but they won't get those kind of, which, knock on wood, is a forest fire in your body. The drier the terrain, the more the fire can just flare. And so that is a hot flash. It's our body responding to that depletion of those juicy hormones. So yeah, and evening primrose is not a hormonal plant, so it's not going to go trying to replace a hormone. It's actually just going to, regulate your glands, and it's really good, glandular health all the way through. But I think of that. I think of just pelvic floor work, like keeping the yoni. So go back to those yoni steams, and maybe even douching. Like, you're either finishing up or you're keeping it nourished enough to kind of see if there's any replenishment there, depending on kind of where you're at and what you're feeling. I can talk about Vitex, but I do think Vitex is a pretty heating plant, so I can't just give it to anyone, but it's probably the most well-known plant here that is used for kind of re-regulating your cycle if you're trying to keep it. But if you're not, if you're not trying to keep it, you're tapering off, there's just, Vitex could probably cause hot flashes. So I wouldn't use it for later stages of trying to regulate. Maybe Clary sage would be a better go-to. Like, Clary sage is so good it's a tonic antispasmodic, or sorry, a uterus antispasmodic. So it takes the uterus and just kind of calms it down. So if there's any blood layer that is still in that open vessel of your uterus, it'll calm the muscles down, so it'll slough off the rest of that blood, and help your pelvic floor kind of like, okay, this is transition time. This is, and it's just great for the muscles anyway. So, and that seems like a really safe one to mention.
Nice. All right. Got some sweet words from Jamie, who met you in 2007. Thank you.
Oh.
All right, and now we've got a question from Tali, wondering how to address a feeling of fluid in the ears, and she's wondering if ear candling is something you'd recommend, or what else you might have.
Okay, so two things I think of. If there's water in the ear, if you told me you just got water in your ear and now it's stuck, I would know that the eustachian tube is not draining. So usually if there is water trapped in the ear, whether it got in there, or what if it didn't even get in there and you just have a bunch of water, like a bunch of fluid that's sitting up in here, and you're like, that sounds like sloshing water, right? Both of those, if they got stuck right here, there is something downstream to that lymph channel, which is right below the clavicle, that is not draining. So really think about the fact that, like, this is gravity. This is based on gravity. And if it is not moving with gravity, there is something holding it up below. So I would really just, a beautiful steam inhalation. And water, you could do rosemary, you could do Elecampane, you could do Mullein, you could do Comfrey. These are all things that you could put into a pot of water, and you would be able to actually, work. So you'd want to get this warm. The moisture of that steam is not going to make more moisture per se. It's not enough to really, exasperate this, but it's going to warm everything up. And so when you're under there, you want to open up your neck and open up everything, and you want to make sure your drain is wide open. You know, think about getting a gua sha on your hand and just start going to town, or like do a full salt scrub first, like a cleansing salt scrub, or drink some of the cleansing tea, you know what I mean? And then go in there and start just, something's not draining. So you're not going to be able to get it back out of your ear very easily. Let's talk about ear candling though, because you mentioned it. You'd want it to drain. But I think ear candling is smart for water in the ear. And the most common time I'll search out an ear candle is with like surfer's ear, you know, which is water trapped in there. And it does dry it out. So smoke is dry. So the smoke that you create in that candle is what is doing the work. So when you go to do an ear candle, you want to really suction it. Like you want to almost like screw it in, you know, and like get a really tight suction. And then you burn it and the smoke goes down and it infiltrates the eardrum, the ear, and then it dries out all your wax and any fluid present, and then it causes a suction effect. So that's the stuff that's inside that looks like, you know, powder, yellow powder.
Right.
That's actually dehydrated earwax. But if you don't have a suction and if you don't have enough smoke driving down into it, then ear candling is going to be like, did that work? Did that not work? I don't know. But that is dehydrated earwax. And if there's not a bunch of earwax in the way, that smoke is going to go further down and it's going to dry out that fluid. So I do think ear candling sounds like a good idea here. It's about doing it right. Yeah. And don't burn your hair or your skin. So like put a paper plate or like use a piece of paper and put a hole in it. You know, I like to use tin foil. I don't know why, but it's like I can meld it a little more. You know, I feel like paper is could catch on fire too.
Right.
So I just think of that. So I use a little piece of tin foil and I just stick the candle in there, you know, and that way I'm safeguarding my looks. I'm safeguarding my Don't you all miss me in class making jokes? Oh, nothing's changed. Nothing has changed, really. Everything has changed and nothing has changed.
Exactly. Well, I think we have time for one more question. We've got Jennifer wondering, this comes back to worms, wondering if the transverse colon is large and hard, would that mean someone would have worms?
I would probably say there are so many, there's other reasons why that transverse could be large and hard. So that could be a true just fecal matter obstruction. Like that could just be, you know, and yes, you could still be having a bowel movement, you know, but maybe they're not complete, or maybe you cramp a lot before, you know, so it's a little trick of the plumbing. But I would say if I went into my transverse colon and I found kind of a hard kind of, you know, I would probably not just think worm. I would probably first think of like there's some compaction. And, you know, you can go in there and break that up. You just, you know, put on some warmth, get some castor oil or even any oil, because you could just use your hands. Castor's just makes it that much better. But just oil in your hands, and you could go in and you could, you know, what I tell people all the time, I'm like, we're going to break up the poop party. You got a little poop party going on in there, and we got to break it up. Everyone is collected in the kitchen. And some people need to go in the backyard, and some people need to go check out the bedroom and, like, you know, disperse. And so this is what I do with kids and even adults, because those poop parties, they're like a log jam. They don't feel good. When you put your hand in there, which is probably why you're asking, you're like, is that a worm? Oh my God. So I don't want to scare anyone. But the more you cannot break up that compaction, like say you do this, say for the next 7 days, you go in with some oil and your hands and you start trying to break it up. You go every direction, you rub it back and forth, you push on it, you pull it through to the left side where it needs to evacuate. What if it just won't change? Nothing will change. Nothing will change. Well, then that'd be a really good reason to do a remote consult with me. You know, just because then we want to like check it out. Let's make a game plan. Let's see what other symptoms are there. So remember, there were other symptoms too. So just a compaction, that's not enough to even make me think worm. But a compaction that won't change every day, I try to move it. And then also there's, a feeling something's taking over, and you also have a level of depletion that you can't change no matter what. And you are really feeling sick and nobody can figure out what's going on. Those are tapeworms. So this information today was for the person who's like, something is wrong and I can't get answers. And I need to see if I have any other signs to lead me somewhere. But it's not just every day that everyone has a tapeworm in there. So, but if you match a lot of those symptoms and you can't move that thing within a week and see it break up, yeah, we should talk. I'd say that would be a good reason to make a game plan.
Yeah, sounds sensible. All right, I got to yank you away from this. Thank you so much for letting me come on screen. If you have any questions that come up, please let us know, because DeAnna does this on the reg. And thank you for being here.
Thank you all so much. Our 25th anniversary is coming up on November 10th. So I just kind of want to put a shout out for everybody to put just a little heart on your calendar for November 10th. And, it'll be our anniversary, 25 years DeAnna Center.
Oh,
very, very cool. And so, yeah, just thank you all for being a part of it all of these years and so many years to come.
Yep.
Thank you. Adiom. Adiom.